My name is Meg Treseder. I am the Adult Services Librarian here at the amazing Azle Memorial Library. I have 4 books to present to you today. One is actually a nonfiction, which I don't typically do, but I have to tell you about this book. So, the first one's nonfiction, the other 3 are fiction, and I'm using my usual rating system of 0 stars to 5. 0, I hated it, and 5, I loved it. So, the first one is called Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City by Matthew Desmond. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I couldn't quite give it 5 just because it is too depressing to give a 5. And I read a lot of depressing books, so that's saying something. But it was absolutely fascinating. The author conducted this years-long ethnographic study of poverty and especially eviction in Milwaukee. And it's fascinating because he lived among these people who were being evicted repeatedly. So you get the viewpoint of the renters, the landlords, people in the housing court system, and then even the people that once you're evicted, your belongings have to be moved out of the apartment or the house. And so he follows those people responsible for moving those items. So you get the viewpoint of everyone. And I appreciated it because he didn't portray the landlords as the villains and then the renters as just these innocents. He really shows everyone, warts and all. But you do see, even with those that you don't love, you do see glimmers of humanity. But I liked it so much because I have never in my life thought about this issue of eviction. And he really does such a good job of, first of all, keeping your interest engaged. I know you think, why would I want to read an entire book about housing? He does it in this wonderful narrative flow, and you just get so consumed with these people's stories. And he illuminates this really terrible problem in our country. I highly recommend it. I think it's a very important book that people should be reading. So that's Evicted. The next one is Miller's Valley by Anna Quindlen. And I gave this one 4 stars. I had not read her before. She's a wonderful author, very descriptive, and she writes about, I think, these very real people living real lives. So it's about a girl named Mimi Miller, and it's a coming-of-age story. She's growing up in Miller's Valley. And it's this town that's kind of under this perpetual threat of being flooded. This dam is just about to burst. And so throughout the book, you get this idea that their homes are kind of in this just tenuous position. And it's about Mimi and her family. She has an agoraphobic aunt and then a brother who has gone away to Vietnam, and he comes back with just a host of issues from his time in the war. So I liked it because it's just this very realistic depiction of life. I could see myself kind of in the characters. And I think she does a particularly good job of reminding you that nothing stays the same, that we're all beholden to weather and the government especially, and that, you know, all lives carry this great heartache and great love at the same time, that no one's immune from those kinds of issues. So the next one is called Dodgers by Bill Beverly. And I gave this one 3 stars. It's not about the Dodgers, the baseball team, just to let you know right off. And I knew that going in, of course, but it still was not what I expected at all. So it's another coming-of-age story. It's about this young man named East. And so he's growing up in LA, and he's a gang member, and his job, and I didn't know this existed, so this was very, I don't know, interesting to me. He worked, I guess there are these drug houses, and they run drugs, you know, in and out. People come and get their supply. And so his job was to be a spotter. He was supposed to stand at attention in an area in the neighborhood and kind of watch for law enforcement to come through. That way they could alert the house to evacuate if need be. So he messes up, his house gets raided. So to redeem himself, his uncle says, you need to go to Wisconsin and kill this key witness that's supposed to testify in a hearing that will implicate the uncle. And so East, along with 3 of his kind of fellow gang members, they go on this like road trip to Wisconsin. And so, spoiler alert, if you want to read this book and you don't want to know the end, just mute me for like the next minute. Okay. So East is this good kid. You get the idea that he's stuck in this terrible position, but he has, you know, a good heart, and he won't let anything bad happen. And you keep thinking that the worst won't happen, and then you're disappointed in this, and the story just keeps taking these turns that I didn't expect, and that can be hard for me. I like to be surprised in a story, but I also kind of like to think I know a little bit where it's headed. And so I was a little bit disappointed. But again, it's kind of this grittier story, and it's terrible to think about these people, these young kids especially, living this life and they don't know anything else. So that it was an interesting story, but I didn't love it. The last one is At the Edge of the Orchard by Tracy Chevalier. I gave this 4 stars. I love her. She's awesome at writing historical fiction. And this one just reminds me of why I love literature, because it reminds you that people lead such different lives, and you wouldn't know that sometimes if you didn't read literature like we do. So I loved it for so many reasons, but that's one. It's about a family called the Good Enough family. That's actually their name, Good Enoughs, and they're living in the swamps of Ohio. And it follows the 2 parents, and they have, over the course of several years, 10 children, and they lose many of them to a fever. So James and Sadie, they're the 2 parents, and James tends their apple orchard, and a man named Johnny Appleseed visits them and sells them these tree seedlings. And they're kind of under contract. To get this land, they had to promise to grow at least 50 apple trees. So James is just consumed. First of all, he loves apples. He loves eating them, but he loves especially tending to his trees. And then his wife Sadie, Sadie is a number, I don't know. She is an alcoholic, so she's addicted to the apple jack that they also produce. But she is a vicious, bitter, toxic woman, and she just kind of wreaks havoc wherever she goes. And it's so funny. I didn't think I would like this. It kind of has, you know, some very unusual characters, and she sets this mood. She's very atmospheric in her writing. She reminds me a lot of Anne Patchett, where they create this world and then you inhabit it with them, you know, as the reader. But I couldn't put this one down. You really fall for the characters. You become very invested in them. So it follows that story. It follows the Good Enoughs as they're trying to, you know, scratch out a living. And then it follows their son, Robert. And you get the idea that something tragic has happened with the family. And then Robert leaves and goes west. And you catch up with him in the story, kind of at the height of the gold rush in California. And Robert also ends up making his living with trees because he's also obsessed with them as well. So again, it's a story I didn't expect to like, but it was a really interesting part in America's history. I liked that it brought in Johnny Appleseed and kind of showed you a different side of him. And even in a story where it's pretty bleak, right? I mean, these people are living very, very hard lives. You still find happiness and hope, and I think she's a wonderful, very descriptive writer. So I will pretty much read anything she writes. So those are my 4 books. I hope that you also get a chance to read them and enjoy them as well. Thank you.